Governor, thank you so much for being here. Us being here, because we are here at the mansion. We appreciate you sitting down with us. It's great to be here with you.
Well, glad to have you.
Well, I want to start off by this, Governor, looking at your time in office. You came in 2019, nearly 6 years later. You have been able to meet some of your campaign promises, right? I want to take a look at one of the bills that was just recently passed, House Bill 916. A lot of people excited about that. A lot of teachers, law enforcement, because they're getting pay raises, right? HB 1015, reducing the income and corporate tax rate. So when we look at what you have done so far, what are some of the biggest accomplishments and what work do you still want to accomplish in your next 2.5 years?
Well, I have to thank our partners in the General Assembly. They've been great teammates to be able to do all the things that really everything that we talked about in the 2018 campaign. And that was, I think, one reason we were so successful on the re-election campaign is because I just did what I said I was going to do. I talked about that a lot in the campaign. I was tired of politicians, that would say one thing when they were campaigning and do something else when they got to either to the State House or to Washington, D.C. And I think people were just tired of that. They were, I think, looking for a workhorse. Somebody would just say, hey, tell me what you're going to do, and then just go up there and try to get it done. And we were successful in doing that. I think our teacher pay raises was a big commitment. A lot of people in the campaign say, he'll never do that. We were going to give a $5,000 pay raise in my first term. We did that. We've now given $9,500 of pay raises to our teachers and our educators in 6 legislative sessions. So we've passed pay raises 4 out of 6 years. So we're really proud about that. We promised to cut taxes. We had the largest state income tax cut in state history 2 years ago. We accelerated, continuing to cut the income tax. We cut the business tax. So we're continuing to create that environment in our state that's business friendly. We also, I ran on keeping Georgians safe and going after criminal street gangs. And we've certainly had a robust effort to be able to do that. That is a moving target. But right now we have a great relationship with the mayor of Atlanta, the Atlanta Police Department. And so a lot of things that people were complaining to me about 2 years ago, street racing, gangs, harassment, people sending me videos at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning going, hey, they're doing donuts in the middle of my street or my apartment complex. We put a dent into that, and we picked up some really bad people while we were doing that. So, fulfilling those promises was very important for me. And when I ran for re-election, we had new promises that we had made, and we're fulfilling those as well.
I want to ask you about something that was very popular with a lot of people. In 2023, some families received up to $500 in surplus tax refund checks. So my question for you, Mr. Governor, is will we see these same tax refund checks in 2024?
Well, we did even better than that this year. We cut taxes. So Georgians are going to save $3 billion over the next 10 years. And we're going to continue working with the legislature to see how we can cut taxes. I had the legislature went along with the tax rebates. I think that's something I campaigned on. We all did on the re-election campaign. It was our way of helping Georgians fight through 40-year high Biden inflation, I called it. But it was really tough out there. Gas prices were high. Grocery prices were high. We had, 9% inflation. It was crazy what was going on. So we were really just trying to help our people fight through that. A way we did that was to do 2 income tax refunds because we had budgeted conservatively, kept the economy open even when we were criticized for that. And so we had some excess revenue to give back. And so, we have cut taxes and given $5 billion back to our hardworking people just to help them, deal with these high grocery prices and high gas prices that they're seeing.
Thank you so much for explaining everything that you have done so far in your term. 2.5 years to go, so a lot of work still to be done. I do want to look ahead to 2024, and I want to start on the local front. And I want to ask you just about your relationship with the Republican Party. The GOP convention here in Georgia is coming up. Last year, you decided not to attend. Are you going to attend this year now that there is some new leadership in place?
Well, I'm certainly appreciative of the new leadership. I think Chairman McCoon's doing his best. I think there's still a lot of issues at the party. but certainly wishing them well. I have no ill will there. But like, we have got to have a ground game in our state, and we need that now. You know, we don't need that 3 months from now or a year from now or when we get into 2026. I mean, we need that right now. So we're working on that. I've got a scheduling conflict, not going to be able to go to the convention this year, but appreciative of what they'll do to try to get the vote out, and I hope that they'll continue to breed confidence in people. I think they made a good move the other day in regards to Brian Pritchett with his issues, and I know that's never easy to do something like that, but I think it was the right thing to do, and certainly applaud them for that.
I want to follow up on that and ask you, I mean, when we look at the Republican Party nationally and here in the state, some say, you know, it's become increasingly divided since the 2020 election, since January 6th. But from your viewpoint, is it that way here in Georgia, and what work could be done to move forward from that?
I wouldn't really say it's division. I just think there's, you know, I mean, look, the party was working against a lot of Republican incumbents when we went into the re-election in 2022. That is not the role of the party. The role of the party is to support Republicans and not get involved in primaries and support our ticket. That's what we've always done in the past. We've been very effective doing that. That was not the case in 2022, very disappointing. But on the other hand, you know, I saw that we did not have a good ground game in 2020. President Trump's campaign did not. Senator Perdue's campaign did not. The party did not. The state party did not. The RNC did not. And you saw what happened in that election. And so when we went into our re-elect, I mean, I was just going to control my own destiny. You know, no ill will against the party or anything else. But I knew that we had to have a ground game. We had to have people that were knocking on doors, telling people what our record was. We had to have people doing phone calls, telling folks what our records were. We had to figure out who the persuadable voters were and figure out what their issues were and figure out a way to get them to vote for us versus my opponent. And so we had to raise a tremendous amount of money and spend a tremendous amount of money to be able to do that. And we have that operation still set up today, and I want to use that politically to help our team and to help the Republican ticket as we go into 2024. I mean, we did that in a special election for a legislative seat in the Augusta area the other day. We're doing that right now to help Supreme Court Justice Andrew Pinson, who I think deserves to stay on the bench. And then we're going to do that to help in a lot of our tough legislative districts to keep the good Republicans that we have on our team that are helping, you know, do these tax cuts and keep people safe and give teachers raises and pay law enforcement more and keep our state moving in the right direction and being the number one state in the country for business. I mean, it's a great team, but we got to do the work. You can't just, you know, rest on your laurels. I mean, we have to have the mechanics of a campaign, and we're set up to do that, and we're going to do that to help the team.
And I want to get back to the campaign, but I do want to ask about a couple of things that happened in the legislative session, some laws that were passed regarding election law, election integrity. SB 189 recently passed. SB 202, as we know, passed in 2021, I believe. So they were passed along party lines to protect election integrity and ensure the right to fair elections. But some people had opposed the laws, saying that these laws are actually going to take Georgia backwards. Some Democrats, right, opposing these laws. What's preventing Georgia from moving backwards when it comes to protecting the right of vote? And what is your answer to people who say these laws passing remind them of the restrictive voting laws that we saw back in the day that were rooted in racism?
Well, I would just say that that's a broken record that's continuing to say the same thing over and over again, but the facts just don't add up. I mean, I don't understand why the Democrats are so afraid of having secure, accessible, fair elections in our state. I mean, the same crowd that's saying things about 189 are the same people that were talking about how bad Senate Bill 202 was going to be. And after we passed that bill, I mean, we added days that people could vote early on the weekend, including Sunday, adding more accessibility for elections. We had record turnout in early voting after we passed that bill. We continue to have some of the largest African American turnout, Hispanic American turnout, and Asian American turnout in the country. But you never hear them say that. You just talk about how restrictive and suppressive, and this is taking us backwards. And I don't think these bills will take us backwards. I mean, I think the legislature was very methodical about what ended up in the final piece of the legislation. We talked to them a lot. We talked to the Secretary of State's office a lot. I think the bills will get challenged legally, so we'll see what ends up happening. But I would just say this, like right now as we do this interview, early voting is going on for our primaries. We got a big congressional primary on the Republican side. You got Democratic primaries on the Democratic side. I mean, other than the U.S. mail being screwed up, and you could talk to people at the federal level about why that continues to be the case, I mean, nobody's calling me saying, hey, we're having a hard time voting, or we're being suppressed or anything else. And so I just do not see, what they're saying add up to what reality is on the ground.
Here's another question some people had, though. These bills, this election integrity came after 2020, where we saw a lot of issues here in Georgia. We had 3 recounts. You decided to stand your ground and say, you know what, we did things right here in Georgia. This is what it is. So if that was the result, why do you think these laws were even needed?
Well, look, going back to 2020, I've done like I've always done. I took an oath with my hand on the Bible to follow the laws and Constitution of this state, the Constitution of the United States, and that's what I did, and that's what I will continue to do. There were issues in the 2020 election, a lot of mechanical issues that we needed to address that the legislature nor I ever had a say-so in, which is the way it should be. And so they felt like they wanted to act to address some of those things when it came to drop boxes, absentee ballots, a lot of other issues that were out there. And mainly this was driven by decisions that were made because of the pandemic and the public health emergency. I think Senate Bill 202 fixed those things. And I think we went into, the 2022 election. When you look at the exit surveys that the University of Georgia did about the election, I mean, 98% of the people approved of the way the election was run. 95% of even African Americans had a good experience in the election. The average voting time was 5 minutes or less for people. And so it's just really easy for people to be able to participate. There was no, real controversies outside of normal things that always happen in an election. There's always problems and issues that happen in elections. And the key is to make sure we have procedures legally that you can follow after the election to either challenge, raise questions, have investigations, and do it in the right way. And that's what we've strived to do. But that being said, the legislators, they're all throughout the state. I had people talking to me about different issues every day, and the legislators do. And so there was legislators that felt like there were other things that we needed to address. That is the way the legislative process works. I was very comfortable with Senate Bill 202 in our last election. But if the legislature is going to work on an elections bill, I'm not just going to stick my head in the sand and let them do whatever they want. I mean, I tried to weigh in, and our staff did, on things that we thought would be good or maybe not so good. And at the end of the day, the bill got where it was, and it passed, and I signed it. And that's the way the process is. And now we'll let that play out as we go into the next election.
And I want to ask you about one more bill, if I could, HB 1105, that was signed. A bill something that you, once again, another one of your campaign promises, something that you've been campaigning on since 2018, is to tackle immigration issues. You joined governors earlier this year at the border in Texas to back Governor Abbott. Republicans have said that, especially after the death of Laken Riley, this was something that came in hot. They said we need to do something about this. It's a 2-part question. I want to start with the first question is, there were calls to veto this bill. There were concerns that this bill would increase discrimination against other residents who might actually be legal residents and or citizens who might look as if, or they might be from Venezuelan descent or Hispanic descent, regardless, that this bill could negatively impact them. What was your response? Obviously, you didn't veto it. You decided to sign it. Do you think that this bill could have negative repercussions for those in that community?
Well, I mean, look, I know we had a few protests here at the mansion. There's 30 or 40 people saying, veto the bill. This is a state of almost 11 million people, and I think people were outraged, and I was too, about the whole Laken Riley tragic murder that we saw, and somebody that had broken into this country illegally and had been apprehended 2 different times and was still here, and we didn't even know he was here. And we've seen around the country the sanctuary city policies of some of the liberal politicians in big cities, or even places like Athens, Clarke County, where we are, that say they're not a sanctuary city. They are certainly have an attitude that may not be the best when it comes to public safety in some areas. And so I felt like the legislature wanted to act. I felt like that was very appropriate. I watched Representative Gaines, Representative Petrie, a lot of other folks that worked on this legislation. They were very thoughtful. We were talking to a lot of different people that this would affect, the municipalities, the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, the sheriffs were very involved. And so I think at the end of the day, we got a good piece of legislation that will help with the issue here to make sure when somebody gets arrested that we're checking to make sure that they're here legally, and if they're not and they have other instances and need to be dealt with, we'll be able to do that. And I just think Americans are outraged by what's been going on at the southern border. And, it's a failure of leadership, quite honestly, in the White House. You think about this. Governors have been complaining about the border situation really since since President Biden got in office and just changed the policies at the border. And we know, because Georgia National Guard, we've had a continuous presence at the border really since I became governor, as long as any state in the country, to try to help tackle the problem, give more resources to the Border Patrol, and protect our country. But Democrats controlled the White House, the U.S. House, and the U.S. Senate from 2020 to 2022. I think that's right. 2020 to 2022, and did absolutely nothing about the border. And this is where we ended up with, innocent young lives lost because we didn't secure our border. And we just want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I think 1105 does a good job of helping to keep our communities safe.
I want to ask you about some news that came down recently. President Biden and President Trump, they have agreed to debate. The first debate happening here in Atlanta. What's your reaction from the news?
Hey, look, I've been saying for months, almost a year now, the road to the White House runs through Georgia. And so, it's playing out. I don't think it was kind of shocking to see that they actually both agreed to a debate that quickly. I think it's a great opportunity, as I've been saying, for Republicans and for President Trump to make the case of why people should vote for him. Looking to the future, telling people what he's for, what he and the team are going to do for the country. I think there's an ability to really contrast that with President Biden, and I hope that's what he does.
I know that you said you hope that he makes the case of why people should vote for him. Would you go as far to endorse President Trump for president?
Well, I've said I'm supporting the ticket. And I'm going to continue to do that. We're building a ground game and raising money right now to help everybody from, like Justice Andrew Pinson in the May primary to a lot of legislators that we're supporting in the primary will do the same thing in the general election and turning out the vote. And that is going to help our whole ticket all the way up to the top in the presidential race.
You touched on this, but if you could expand, what exactly does your role look like? And I want to preface this by saying in 2020, when you put your foot down here at the election, you were the center of a lot of attacks from the former president, from people of your own party, even some voters. Some people did stick beside you, though, right? But given that history, what does your role look like in helping to get Trump elected, or is it more focused on the Republican Party? Yeah, look, I'm a team player. The American people have picked what the teams look like. We'll see who actually gets on the presidential ballot here in Georgia and around the rest of the country, whether it's, just Joe Biden and Donald Trump, or whether we're going to have third-party candidates and others that are on the ballot. But, for the most part, the field's set. So Americans and Georgians have a choice to make. And I am going to support the Republican ticket from the bottom of the ticket all the way up to the top. And I've had people ask me, why are you going to vote for somebody that was so mad at you and said so many bad things about you? And I just simply said, because I think they'd be a better president than Joe Biden's been. I want to ask you quickly here about Trump's legal issues. I know in the past you've said that they've been a distraction. Here in Fulton County, do you think the District Attorney Fani Willis prosecuting Donald Trump is doing her job, or do you think that's a distraction?
Well, look, I wouldn't be able to answer, the mindset on being a prosecutor and why she's taken actions and why she hasn't. I would just say, and look, I've been subpoenaed in that case. I got to be very careful about what I'm saying because I may be called to testify at some point. But I will say a lot of people, including myself, think it's been very politically motivated on how that has played out. And I think that's certainly the case in New York and potentially some of the other cases. And I think the Democrats, quite honestly, have overplayed their hand by waiting so long. It looked political. Some of the things that are playing out on the TV every day look political. But, I can't begin to, assume what's going to happen, what the juries are going to decide. I mean, I said a long time ago, I didn't think most of these cases would happen before the election. Obviously, the New York case is, but I don't know that another one will. And I think, quite honestly, at this point, as political as it's been and as late in the process as it's been, it's probably best to let the American people weigh in and decide, who they want to be their next president, which I think will send a signal about what they think about these cases.
The former president says this case should be dropped. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, I wouldn't be able to, I'm sure the current president, if he gave a straight answer, would say, no, it doesn't need to be dropped. Prosecutors won't say that. So, man, I'm not going to weigh in on, on the
his team wants it to be, his defense says the case should be dropped. Yeah,
well, look, his defense made a case for a mistrial. I mean, the judge didn't grant it, but I certainly could see, why they would ask that question when you think about where some of the testimony's gone about, testimony in the courtroom that had nothing to do with, the financial charges that he's been charged with that normally are a misdemeanor and have been bumped up to be a felony. But look, those are all legal issues. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a prosecutor. I think President Trump's got a good legal team that will continue to make those points known, and there's plenty of other politicians doing that as well. I mean, I got a busy job being governor of the state and keeping our state moving in the right direction and making sure that we keep the team together, the House members and Senate members and the leadership that we have with, Speaker Burns and Lieutenant Governor Jones, our other constitutional officers like Attorney General Carr, Commissioner King, and Harper. I mean, we got a great team that's all working really hard to keep our state moving in the right direction, keep on the track that we've been on. I mean, there's a reason that people are moving to Georgia. Back to your point on the elections bill. I mean, people are not buying into all these, arguments that just have big holes in them about it's hard to vote here. I mean, people are moving to our state because they're having good opportunity. They're not moving here and experiencing voter suppression. They're moving here and experiencing a great business environment, great job opportunities, a great place to live, work, and raise their family. You look around the country right now, I mean, there's people right now, the same kids that during COVID could not have a high school graduation, they're now not having one for college 4 years later because you got a bunch of crazy people that have locked down college campuses and you don't have enough people standing up to say, you're not going to disrupt the campus. Protest all you want within the rules that we have, but we're not going to let you stop a graduation from happening. I mean, that hasn't happened in Georgia. We went to 2 graduations last weekend, one for our middle daughter, and it was incredible to see just the excitement of these kids. And, I'm sitting there looking at them thinking, man, all these people have got opportunity in Georgia, and we need them. We need them to stay here and work in our state because we got jobs for them. Our employers need them. I mean, it was so exciting to see that that's coming out of our university system every day. It's coming out of our technical college system every year. And that gives me great hope for the future here.
I know our time is just about out, but if I could, there's one viewer, her name is Camilla, and she wanted me to ask you this question. What would you say are your primary aspirations for Georgia to become a more peaceful state? And what actions do you encourage citizens to take to support this vision to keep our state safe?
Well, I think people need to demand of their elected officials that they do like I have and what the Constitution says and make sure that they take public safety seriously. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. I've always been a peace through strength kind of person, and I know a lot of people talk about that in the form of national defense. But I think when you look back to whether it was George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, protests that was going on during COVID when it was very politically tense, the 2020 election, at one point, we had 3,000 people demonstrating in Georgia, walking the streets of Atlanta, protesting, marching, singing out, shouting out, because they had seen injustice with their own eyes. And I certainly understood their reasoning behind that. And we facilitated and helped work to allow that to happen. But it happened within the rules. And when we had people that started burning police cars and destroying businesses' storefronts and stealing shoes and, trying to burn down buildings and assault police officers, we are absolutely not going to allow that to happen in our state. And I think that's the duty of the executive branch. And that is how I think we can continue to be peaceful, because I don't think anybody can say, that Brian Kemp's tried to keep things from happening and has, been brutal in those situations. I mean, we have told people what the rules are. We've told them what they can do and allowed them to do that. But if they break those rules, that's the end of the game. And if you don't handle things that way, you end up with chaos like we're seeing on college campuses from New York to California.
And I do have to ask this. Looking ahead.
All right, I thought that was your last question.
I know, I tricked you. One more if that's okay. I know,
no,
we're
I don't
here.
have to answer this.
Looking ahead to 2026, 2028, and beyond. 3-part question, so you could just knock it out in one thing. What does a potential Congress with a Senator Kemp look like? What does a potential White House with a President Kemp look like? Or what does life after politics look like just on the farm in Athens?
Well, I'll just have to let you speculate about that, because I've told people I'm not looking past 2024. I think part of Republicans' problems is that we've had, too many people looking in the rearview mirror at what happened in the past, and too many people looking too far ahead about what they think somebody else is going to do in the future. For us to be successful and to win, we need to stay focused on one thing, and that is winning in 2024. That's exactly what we did in 2022. We didn't look back to 20. We stayed focused on telling people, you reelect me, I'm going to do this, this, and this. I'm going to help you fight through 40-year high inflation by, doing tax refunds and doing property tax relief and giving teacher pay raises and other things. And that's what we did. And I think that's what our candidates need to do now. They need to stay focused in the moment. The political folks out there, the grassroots people, anybody else that's concerned about the election, we need to stay focused on how it is that we can win and keep our team together to keep this great state moving in the right direction. We can worry about 26 and 28 after November 5th, I think it is, of 2024.
But you're going to call us when you decide.
You call me. You can ask me that question again, right after the election. Hopefully it won't be a month after the election. Hopefully it'll be a few days after the election. We'll know.
We'll see. Governor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really
Enjoy
appreciate
it.
your time.